The silence before the storm. The rain had been falling all night. It wasn't the heavy kind that floods streets, but the quiet, stubborn rain that seemed endless. Keanu sat by the window of his small apartment, watching droplets slide down the glass, one after another. The city outside was alive with lights, cars moving through wet streets, but his own world felt still and empty. He had always been a man of strength, the type who carried more pain inside than he ever let others see. But tonight, something inside him had cracked. The scripts that once inspired him now felt like empty pages. The calls from producers, the endless expectations, and the burden of being seen as a symbol of kindness had drained him. He was tired, not just of work, but of himself. He whispered words no one else would ever hear, words that trembled in the quiet room. Maybe it's time to stop. The sound of those words frightened him. Keanu had faced loss before. He had walked through grief, and he had carried sorrow like a shadow that followed him everywhere. But this was different. This was not grief pressing in from outside. This was his own heart turning against him, telling him that nothing he did mattered anymore. His phone buzzed on the table, lighting up with a message. He didn't reach for it. He didn't want to. The world had given him love, but tonight, he couldn't feel it. Loneliness has a way of making even the brightest lights dim. And then, quietly, there was a knock at the door. Keanu almost ignored it. People rarely visited unannounced, and he didn't want to face anyone. But the knocking came again, softer this time, like whoever stood outside understood that he was fragile. When he opened the door, he saw her. Ana de Armas. She wasn't dressed like a star, not tonight. She stood in a simple coat, her hair slightly wet from the rain, her eyes calm but searching. She looked at him the way someone looks at a friend who is standing too close to the edge. "You didn't answer my calls?" she said softly. Keanu stepped aside, letting her in without a word. The warmth of the room seemed to grow as she entered. She placed her coat on the chair and turned to him, her gaze steady, almost too steady for him to hold. He tried to smile, but it was weak, the kind of smile that hides more than it shows. "I didn't think anyone would notice," he whispered. Ana walked closer, her voice gentle but firm. "People notice when someone they care about disappears into silence. I noticed." There was a pause, a heavy pause. Keanu felt the weight of her words pressing against the emptiness inside him. He wanted to argue, to say that she couldn't possibly understand what he carried, but he stayed quiet. Sometimes silence feels safer than breaking. Ana sat down on the couch and looked at him. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. He shook his head. "It won't change anything." Her eyes softened. She leaned forward, speaking slowly, carefully, as if each word was meant to reach him where nothing else could. "It will change something, Keanu. It will change the part of you that feels alone." His chest tightened. He wanted to believe her, but doubt was stronger. "I've lost hope," he admitted, the words leaving his lips like a confession. For a long moment she didn't reply. She only watched him, her expression unreadable, her silence louder than any words. And then, when he least expected it, she spoke one line. "Hope isn't something you wait for. It's something you give yourself." Those words hung in the air, heavy and bright at the same time. Keanu felt them break through the wall he had built around his heart. It wasn't advice, it wasn't pity, it was truth. His eyes burned, and for the first time in a long while, he let himself feel the pain he had buried so deep. Ana didn't move closer. She didn't rush to comfort him. She simply sat there, present, steady, giving him the space to let the silence turn into something softer. And in that small apartment, On that quiet, rainy night, something began to shift. Not enough to erase the darkness, not enough to heal everything, but enough to remind him that he wasn't alone. It was only the beginning. The morning after the rain had stopped by dawn, soft light touched the curtains of Keanu's apartment, spilling across the floor in pale gold. He had not slept much. His mind replayed Anna's words again and again, as if they were etched into the silence of the night. Hope isn't something you wait for. It's something you give yourself. He had turned those words over in his heart, uncertain if he believed them. Yet they lingered, refusing to fade away. Even as fatigue pressed down on him, he felt something he hadn't felt in days. A small flicker, fragile but alive. Anna had fallen asleep on the couch. She had insisted on staying, saying she didn't want him to face the night alone. Now, as the light grew stronger, she stirred, brushing her hair back from her face. She looked at him with gentle eyes, not asking questions, not pressing for answers. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked softly. "A little," Keanu replied, though they both knew it wasn't true. She sat up, stretching her arms. Sometimes the night feels heavier than the day. Mornings are a chance to begin again. Her words carried no grand weight, but they felt steady, real. Keanu found himself nodding, even if part of him doubted. He walked to the kitchen and made coffee. The familiar act grounded him. 2 cups placed carefully on the table. He slid one toward her, and for a moment the world felt ordinary again. But ordinary did not last. His phone buzzed. This time he picked it up. It was his agent. A film he had agreed to months ago, a role many expected him to carry, was falling apart. The studio was worried. The press had started whispering, and the weight of expectation now crashed back onto his shoulders. Keanu listened in silence as the voice on the other end listed deadlines, concerns, and pressures. When the call ended, he placed the phone face down on the table, his jaw tight. "They need me to fix everything," he muttered. Anna leaned forward, studying him. "And do you want to?" Her question caught him off guard. He had always been the man who showed up, who carried the burden, who did what was asked of him. But did he want to? He wasn't sure anymore. "I don't know," he admitted. Anna's gaze did not waver. "Maybe that's the first step. To be honest about what you want, not just what the world asks of you." Her words unsettled him because they carried a truth he had avoided. He had given so much of himself to others that he had forgotten to ask what he wanted for himself. As the morning stretched on, Anna suggested a walk. Hesitant at first, Keanu agreed. They stepped outside into the fresh air, the streets washed clean by rain. People moved about, unaware of the storm inside him. The city looked different today, clearer, sharper, as if the rain had stripped away some of its noise. Keanu noticed small things he hadn't seen before: the smile of a man helping his child tie a shoe, a woman handing food to someone on the street, the sound of laughter echoing from a cafe. "Look at them," Anna said quietly as they walked. "Everyone carrying something, everyone fighting battles no one else can see. Yet they keep moving." Keanu followed her gaze. The world had not stopped for him, nor for anyone. And maybe that was its own kind of lesson. But just as he felt that small flicker of hope again, the past came knocking. A group of reporters had been waiting near the corner. Cameras flashed, questions flew. They wanted to know why he had been absent, if he was failing, if his career was in trouble. Their voices cut sharp into the fragile calm he had been holding on to. Keanu froze. The noise, the questions, the invasion of space, it all felt crushing. Anna stepped closer, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. Her voice, calm but firm, broke through the chaos. "You don't owe them an answer right now," she whispered. He looked at her, surprised by her steadiness. The cameras kept flashing, the questions kept coming, but for a moment he only saw her. And just like the night before, Her presence reminded him of something simple yet powerful. He wasn't alone. They pushed past the reporters, walking away together. His heart still raced, but he realized something. He had made it through the storm of questions without breaking. Later, when they returned to the apartment, Keanu sat quietly, his thoughts heavy but clearer than before. "I don't know where I'm going," he confessed. Anna smiled faintly. "Then let's start with where you are. Sometimes the first step is not forward. It's simply standing without falling." Her words wrapped around him like a fragile shield. The journey ahead would not be easy. But something inside him whispered that maybe, just maybe, he could find his way back. And he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't do it alone. The weight of shadows the next evening, the city was glowing again, but Keanu didn't feel its light. After the run-in with reporters, something heavy had settled inside him. It was not just the pressure of work or the noise of strangers. It was the quiet, familiar shadow of doubt. It followed him back into his apartment, whispering that nothing had truly changed, that hope was still far away. Anna noticed the silence between his words. She didn't press him, but her eyes kept searching his face. She knew he was carrying something he hadn't yet spoken. They sat in the living room, the soft hum of the city outside. Keanu stared at the floor, his voice low. "Every time I think I'm moving forward, it feels like the past pulls me back. I can't escape it." Anna leaned closer, her tone gentle. "What past, Keanu?" He hesitated. For years he had carried grief quietly, never speaking too deeply about it. People admired him for his strength, but they never saw the cracks beneath. Tonight, however, the words came slowly, heavy as stones. "I've lost too much," he whispered. "People I loved, moments I thought would last forever. I learned to keep going, but sometimes I wonder if I've only been pretending. Maybe I've just been walking with ghosts." The room felt colder after his words. Anna didn't interrupt. She knew some truths were too fragile to meet with quick comfort. Instead, she let silence be the space where his pain could breathe. After a long pause, she spoke quietly. "The ghosts you carry. Maybe they aren't holding you back. Maybe they're asking you to remember why you kept walking in the first place." Her words struck him deeper than he expected. He had always thought of loss as something that chained him, but she was asking him to see it as something else, something that had shaped his resilience, not just his sorrow. Still, the doubt inside him pushed back. "But what if I fail again? What if I'm not enough for anyone anymore?" Anna's eyes softened. She reached out, resting her hand lightly on his. "Then fail with courage. Be not enough with honesty. People don't need you to be perfect, Keanu. They need you to be real." His throat tightened. No one had spoken to him like that in years, without expectation, without the weight of image or reputation. Just truth. And then, as if the world wanted to test the fragile strength she had given him, his phone rang again. It was not his agent this time. It was the studio itself. They demanded answers, demanded commitment. He listened as the voice told him that the film's future rested on him. Millions of dollars, hundreds of jobs, all waiting for his decision. When the call ended, he felt cornered. The walls seemed closer, the air tighter. Anna studied his expression. "What are you going to do?" His voice cracked. "I don't know. If I walk away, I let everyone down. If I stay, I lose myself. Either way, I can't win." Anna shook her head. "You're looking at it wrong. It's not about winning. It's about choosing what keeps you alive inside." Her words echoed in him. Alive inside. It was a phrase that cut through the noise of responsibility and fear. But before he could respond, another storm came. A news alert flashed across his phone, an article questioning his health, his future, his very place in the industry. It painted him as broken, as fading, as someone who could no longer carry the weight of being Keanu Reeves. His hands trembled as he read. Doubt swelled like a wave, threatening to drown the fragile hope he had begun to build. Anna saw the fear in his eyes and spoke firmly, her voice steady. Don't let them decide your story. You're more than headlines. You're more than roles. You're a human being who still has something to give, even if the world can't see it right now. Tears stung his eyes, though he tried to hide them. But what if I have nothing left to give? Anna's grip on his hand tightened. She leaned closer, her voice almost a whisper. Then give the world your truth. Even broken pieces shine in the light. Keanu closed his eyes, her words sinking deep. The shadow inside him didn't vanish, but for the first time he realized he could stand and face it, rather than run. He wasn't healed, not yet. But something inside him shifted that night. It was the beginning of a choice, whether to let the world define him or to define himself by the quiet strength he still carried. Anna stayed by his side, her presence unwavering. And as the night grew darker, Keanu felt a fragile spark. Not hope in its fullness, but a promise of it. Standing in the storm the following morning felt different. The city was alive as always, but Keanu's apartment seemed quieter, heavier with the weight of choices not yet made. The news article had spread fast. His face was everywhere. On television screens, on magazine covers, on online headlines. They painted him as a man who had already stepped back, as if his silence was proof that he had given up. Anna sat across from him at the table, her coffee untouched. She had read the articles too, but her expression held no judgment. Only calm, only patience. They've already decided who you are, Keanu muttered bitterly. Broken, finished, fading. I don't even have to speak. They've written my story for me. Anna leaned forward, her voice steady. Then write it yourself. You don't have to shout. You don't have to fight. You just have to show them the truth of who you are. Not for them, but for you. The words sank deep. He realized she wasn't asking him to fight the press, or to please the studio, or even to prove anything to the world. She was asking him to be himself, without masks, without fear. But the test came sooner than either of them expected. That afternoon, his agent called again. The studio wanted a meeting. Today. They wanted answers. They wanted to know if Keanu Reeves was still the man they had placed their hopes on, or if they needed to let him go. Keanu hesitated. His heart pounded at the thought of walking into that room, facing those eyes full of doubt. I can't, he whispered. Anna placed her hand over his. Her touch was warm, grounding. Yes, you can, because this time, you're not walking in there alone. Her certainty gave him a strength he didn't know he still had. Hours later, they arrived at the studio. The building loomed tall, its glass walls reflecting the city back like a mirror. Keanu paused outside the doors, breathing in the heavy air. Anna stood beside him, silent but steady. Inside, the meeting room buzzed with tension. Executives sat in polished chairs, papers spread across the table, eyes sharp with impatience. One of them spoke first, their tone clipped. Keanu, we need to know where you stand. The future of this project depends on you. The press is already tearing us apart. Keanu sat quietly, his hands resting on the table. The old him might have nodded, promised, carried the weight without question. But tonight was different. Anna's words echoed inside him. Write your story yourself. He raised his head and spoke slowly, his voice calm but firm. I can't be what you expect me to be if it means losing myself. I've given everything for years, and yes, I've stumbled. But stumbling doesn't mean I've fallen for good. I will continue, but on my terms. Not as your product, as a person who still has something to give. The room fell silent. The executives exchanged uneasy glances. No one had expected him to speak this way, without anger, without apology, but with truth. Anna, sitting quietly behind him, smiled faintly. She knew this was the moment he had to face, the moment he chose himself. One executive leaned back, frowning. You're asking us to trust that you can carry this, when the world already thinks you're slipping. Keanu met his gaze. The world doesn't decide my worth, and neither do you. I do. His words carried no arrogance, only quiet strength. The room shifted, the atmosphere heavier, but something undeniable had been spoken. After the meeting ended, Keanu and Anna stepped back out into the evening air. He was exhausted, his chest still tight from speaking, but he felt lighter somehow. Anna looked at him, her eyes shining. You did it. You didn't let them write your ending. Keanu shook his head. I don't know what happens next. They might still turn against me. Anna smiled softly. Maybe. But today, you stood in the storm without breaking. That's what matters. As they walked away, Keanu realized something important. Hope was not a grand moment of light breaking through darkness. It was smaller, quieter. It was in the act of standing when everything tried to push you down. It was in telling the truth when silence would have been easier. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to walk it. The backlash. The next days came like waves, loud, restless, and unrelenting. The studio meeting had ended with silence, but silence in Hollywood never stayed quiet for long. Soon, news spread. Stories twisted his words. Headlines shouted half-truths, and commentators debated whether Keanu Reeves had finally reached his end. Some articles praised his honesty. Others painted him as fragile, unreliable, a man past his time. The voices clashed, but together they formed a storm that surrounded him wherever he went. Keanu sat on the couch one morning, scrolling through the endless flood of opinions. He saw strangers dissecting his life as if it were a puzzle they could solve, as if his pain was entertainment. His chest grew heavy, and for a moment, he wished he could disappear into the shadows again. Anna walked in, carrying 2 cups of tea instead of coffee this time. She placed one in front of him without a word. She didn't need to ask what he was reading. She already knew. They're tearing me apart, he whispered. Anna sat beside him, her eyes calm. They don't know you. They only know the pieces they choose to see. He looked at her, his voice breaking. But what if they're right? What if I am too broken to keep going? She shook her head. Broken doesn't mean finished. Broken means human. And maybe that's what the world needs to see most, that even someone like you can stand again after falling. Her words were simple, but they rooted themselves in him. Still, the weight of the backlash pressed harder. Fans who had once adored him now questioned him. Offers slowed, whispers grew louder, and everywhere he turned, he saw doubt reflected back. One evening, as they walked through the city, a stranger approached. The man wasn't cruel, but his words cut deep. Keanu, I admired you once. But maybe it's time you let go. The world has moved on. Keanu froze. The man's words echoed his deepest fear, the one he had been wrestling with alone. Anna noticed the way his shoulders tensed, the way his breath grew shallow. Before he could respond, she stepped forward, her voice firm. No, she said quietly, but with power. The world doesn't decide when someone is finished. People are not stories you can close because you think you know the ending. The man looked startled, then muttered something and walked away. Keanu stood in silence, her words still hanging in the air. As they continued walking, he turned to her. "Why do you believe in me so much?" Anna's expression softened. "Because I see the part of you that refuses to stop caring, even when it hurts. I see the way you still look at people with kindness, even when you're drowning inside. That's strength, Keanu. Not perfection, not unbreakable walls, but kindness that survives storms." Her words shook something loose inside him. He had always thought strength meant never breaking, but maybe strength was something else. Standing even while broken, giving even while hurting. The next morning, he made a choice. He would face the backlash not by hiding, not by fighting, but by sharing his truth. He agreed to a live interview. Not scripted, not controlled, just him, raw and real. The studio panicked at first, but Keanu didn't waver. Anna sat with him before the cameras went live, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Remember," she said softly, "you don't have to be perfect. Just be real." The red light blinked on. Millions were watching. For a moment his throat tightened, his hands trembled. But then he remembered her words. Hope isn't something you wait for, it's something you give yourself. He looked into the camera and spoke. Not as a star, not as a legend, but as a man. "I've been lost," he admitted. "I've been tired, I've been broken. People think strength means never falling, but strength is standing again, even when the world thinks you can't." The words flowed, not polished, not rehearsed, but true. He spoke of grief, of silence, of the shadows he had carried. And then he spoke of hope. Not as something grand, but as small moments, as the choice to keep going when stopping feels easier. When the interview ended, the studio was stunned. The world was stunned. But Keanu felt lighter. And as the night grew quiet, Anna looked at him with a soft smile. "You didn't just tell them your story," she said. "You reminded them of their own." Keanu sat back, breathing deeply. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. But tonight, for the first time in years, he felt alive inside. The light returns. The night after the interview was restless. Keanu sat near the window again, just as he had the night this all began, when the rain had hidden his despair. But tonight, there was no rain. The sky was clear, the city lights steady. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt alive. Messages began to pour in, some from old friends, some from strangers across the world. People wrote about their own struggles, about nights they had wanted to give up, about the weight they carried silently. They told him that hearing him admit his pain made them feel less alone. Keanu read each one slowly, his chest tightening with emotion. For years, he had believed his kindness was enough, that silent endurance was strength. But now he saw something else: honesty, vulnerability, truth. These too were acts of kindness. Anna sat across from him, her eyes gentle as always. "Do you see it now?" she asked softly. He looked up, his voice unsteady. "See what?" "That your pain has meaning. Not because it should have happened, but because you've turned it into something that helps others. That's what hope really is. It's not waiting for someone to save you. It's choosing to let your story light the path for someone else." Her words broke something inside him, but in a way that healed rather than hurt. Tears slid down his face, quiet and unashamed. For years he had buried his grief deep, hiding it even from himself. But now, sitting here, he realized that every scar carried a lesson. Every shadow held a piece of light. The next weeks became a blur of change. Offers returned, not the kind that demanded perfection, but ones that respected who he was. Interviews no longer asked only about his roles, but about resilience, kindness, and the strength of honesty. People didn't just see Keanu Reeves, the actor. They saw Keanu, the man. One evening, he and Anna walked along the beach. The ocean stretched wide, waves crashing gently at their feet. The horizon glowed with the last colors of sunset. Keanu stopped, staring at the endless water, his voice quiet but certain. "I thought hope was gone," he said. "But maybe it was never gone. Maybe I just forgot how to see it." Anna smiled, her eyes shining in the fading light. "You didn't forget. You just needed someone to remind you. And now, you'll remind others." Keanu nodded, the truth of her words settling deep in his heart. For the first time in years, he didn't feel chained by his past. Instead, he felt guided by it. Every loss, every moment of silence, every night of despair, it had all led him here, to this moment, to this choice. As the stars began to appear above the ocean, Keanu turned to Anna. "You were right, that first night. Hope isn't something you wait for. It's something you give yourself." She took his hand, squeezing it gently. "And now, you've given it to others, too." He looked out at the sea, feeling the quiet strength of her presence beside him. He knew the world would still test him, that shadows would return, that headlines would rise and fade, but he also knew something stronger. He was no longer afraid of the darkness, because he carried his own light. And as they stood together on that shore, Keanu understood the truth he had been searching for all along. Strength was not about never breaking. It was about breaking and still choosing to stand, still choosing to love, still choosing to hope. The story was not over. It never would be. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, Keanu Reeves felt whole.